So welcome everyone. I was actually saying it's always fun that these webinars start as a little bit of surprise for the speakers, and there I've just proved it perfectly by not actually being able to get off the mute button. So thank you very much for joining us this morning for what hopefully will be an interesting session. The plan for today is very much to share some information from our esteemed speakers around the sector, but also to build on work that's come before. So what we're trying to do is welcome back some familiar faces and hopefully encourage some of you to also join us in a community that we're building towards this question of how do we move foundation endowments towards impact across Europe. So without further ado, my name's Peter, and for those of you I haven't met before, I work with my colleague Alessia here at EVPA, working with a focus on foundations, philanthropy, and also catalytic capital, all of which combine at some point down the journey. We just haven't worked out 100% how yet, but they will. And on today's eTalk, we're not doing anything revolutionary in terms of structure. We'll do a quick welcome from myself, a little bit of framing of the conversation, introduce our speakers, have a quick panel, and then as always, there will be a Q&A for the last 20 minutes so of this session. I really would say please do put your questions in the chat. If we can't get to questions, we will follow up afterwards and the speakers will agree to do so. Equally, if we have a small group, we may be able to call people out as well to just speak to your questions as well if you put them in the chat, so please do so. And then we'll close with some next steps and where we go next. So very briefly, before we introduce our esteemed panelists from Phenix and Philea, I just wanted to just touch on this fact that this isn't just a one-off webinar stuck in the middle of nowhere, but actually it reflects work that certainly EVPA we've been doing for many years, but we renewed our focus on this over the last 2 years. So we came to this being completely transparent from a feeling of slight frustration that we were feeling from our members, that we, after a number of years in this space, we still only had the same handful of case studies, and we still had only a small number of foundations being able to move across into impact with their endowments. We realize it's difficult and everyone has their own challenges or in different regions, different legislation, but we felt there was real value in bringing transparency to this sector and to try and help you as members and non-members to share your stories, learn from each other, and hopefully move some of those endowments towards more impact capital, which is at the heart of what EVPA is trying to achieve. So we've done a number of events over the last few months. I'll just quickly highlight 2 of those previously, and those were the eTalks that we kicked off with, one on why you should be doing this, with some great examples from the Van Leer Foundation, Anisvad Foundation, and some other friends. And then secondly, earlier this year, an endowment focused webinar on how you can do it, because a lot of people in this space haven't looked at it for a number of years, and often the challenge is a lack of products. So we thought we'll try and be smart and show you some products that are out there, to not to promote those products, but rather just to get the conversation going and making people realize that maybe things have changed. So I make no bones for making it quite a UK focused session that time, and we had representatives from the public equity listed Big Society Capital solution, the fund of funds solution at Snowball, and also the direct impact funds of Resonance in the UK as well. So both of those eTalks are available on our website, and we'll follow up with links so you can access that information as well. And this all builds to Impact Week at the end of this year, where we're hoping to bring together a core component of you guys to sit in a room and really talk about the next steps in how we move the endowment forwards. But I'm not going to ruin that surprise, because we'll come back to that pledge workshop later in the session, hopefully. The other thing that I want to throw into what my colleague Alessia would call the blah blah at the start of the webinar is something that I think is often missed in these sort of webinars, where suddenly we're bringing together 3 organizations to talk on a webinar. It feels like, oh, let's all pretend we've been friends, and then you never hear of them again. But what I really wanted to point out is that this is not a new start for us. I think all 3 organizations have been working on this space of moving foundations to impact for a number of years, and actually we have worked jointly together. So there's been examples that you may have come across, whether it's the joint working group that EVPA and Philea led for foundations along the spectrum of capital from 2019, or whether you've just almost stumbled across, if we're honest, some of the cross-pollination at each other's events. So at our Impact Week, at the Phoenix Impact Summit, which I think is March next year, and the Philea Forum that happens annually as well. And so because we're so needing to prove this, we've even put evidence that we really have been on panels together in the pictures as well. So it's really just to get a feeling that you're joining a movement here and not just people trying to look like they work together. Hopefully that makes sense. And now to prove that collaboration is kind of important, I just wanted to very quickly flag up who's in the room. And I think we do this at every one of these e-talks we do, simply because it's great. So from the registration forms, we can see that 2/3 of you are foundations, grant makers. You are people who hopefully may move your endowments to impact. But it's important that you're not alone in the room. All three organizations on this call respect that safe spaces are important, and we all love safe spaces. But actually, if we're going to move endowments to impact, we also need other players in the room. So we need the investment products, we need the intermediaries, we need service providers and others. So this slide is really just to say you're all welcome. Please do put your questions in the chat. If you're not a foundation, you don't have to hide or pretend you're not. We want you in the conversation. So please do feel free to take part. And then finally, on the subject of collaboration and testing the might of Zoom, I'm just going to ask our fellow panelists to just very briefly introduce themselves, just with sort of name, job title, where you're calling in from, and maybe, I don't know, like the best meal you've had in the last week. It's always good to throw a random question at panelists. So I think I'll start with Chiara at Phoenix. And I suppose to complete the circle, I'm actually based in Hamburg, and the best meal I've had last week was a very bad for me hot dog that I had in Copenhagen last week with full onions. So over to you, Chiara.
Hi, Peter. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Good afternoon, actually, good morning to all of you. I'm Chiara Bornemann from Phoenix Capital. Currently in Tokyo, in Japan. So late afternoon for me. And yeah, usually based in Amsterdam, though. Phoenix Capital is an impact investing consultancy firm. And we focus on helping institutional investors with making impact allocations. We do that with advisory services, which is the part that I focus on, and also with events and publications, as Peter, you just mentioned. I think my best meal was a ramen, vegetarian ramen here in Tokyo this last week, definitely. Yeah, happy to be here and to discuss impact investing with you all.
I realized I set myself up for a fail when I remembered you were in Tokyo. Your meal was going to inspire you. Hannah, I don't know, would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Peter, for the introduction, as also from my end. And indeed, it's really hard to beat the Japanese cuisine, I think. So my name is Hannah. I'm policy manager at Philea, and I'll lay out a bit more in detail what Philea is and what we do, especially also pertaining to impact investing. But thinking of my favorite meal, maybe I feel like I need to also promote my home country, which is Belgium. We have really good fries. Even though people call them French fries, I still believe that they're actual Belgian. So there we go. I had really nice ones this weekend. I'm looking forward to the conversations today.
And then lastly, I'll hand over to Alessia because the Italians don't know much about food, so we should be fine.
So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Peter, for the intro. Welcome, Chiara and Hannah. Thank you for joining us. I'm a colleague of Peter, so I'm the Director of Knowledge and Programs. I started at EVPA in 2014, so it is a long journey, and I'm responsible for everything that is data collection, content production, and I also work closely with our market development leads on the programs we develop for specific types of organizations. That's why it's already 4 years and something, I think, that I collaborate with Peter on everything that is linked to philanthropy and foundations, and as well with our partners such as Philea and Phenix Capital. Best meal, I wanted to say pizza, but then I mean, I'm Italian. I'm based in Italy. I'm based in Torino, actually. So it was not very unexpected. So I would say a risotto. So rice with mushroom. It's a little bit from my own region, so not to keep on stereotypes. But now I think it's my turn to continue. And actually, we would like to know a bit more about you guys in the audience. So we have prepared a poll question that I'm going to show you if technology assists me. So voila, basically this is a question. If you can go to Slido, or if you can use the QR code. And this is also a test to see whether you are following us or not. But basically, this is a question that we have already asked in the previous 2 webinars that we have run, which Peter presented at the beginning. What was interesting for us is that in the 2 webinars, the answers that we got were different. So it also gives us the possibility to see different insights and also to look at the composition of the room and to look at the answers of the people. So I'm happy that you have started answering. So we can see, I can read the question, and then you can keep registering and using Slido. So I will still give time to people that are a bit slow with technology, like me. So luckily, I don't have to use Slido myself now. So in your country, what are the challenges hindering foundations from investing endowments responsibly or with social purposes, or from doing any mission-related investments? And then we have a few options: lack of know-how, fear of not generating financial returns that affects then the capacity of giving grants, lack of understanding, not a priority for the boards, regulatory limitations, or lack of resources. And what is interesting is that for the first time we have included this not a priority for the boards, because this was not an option in the past, but we also wanted to highlight this potential challenge, let's say, for foundations. Oh, nice. So I see that, the first answer for the moment, it's fear of not generating financial returns, which then affects the capacity of giving grants, which is something that we hear a lot, something that we also consider a myth, but I'm not going in depth into that. We can then discuss with our speakers later. You can keep voting. I will continue now with 3 slides on content. So to do the counterpart of Peter. Peter was on blah, blah. I'm trying to bring some frameworks to the discussion and some data that we have collected as EVPA before handing over to Hannah and then Chiara to present their own slides. So before, just because I know that you are curious, I also wanted to show what were the responses from the past. So in the last webinar, we got the same first answer. So this fear of not generating financial returns, enough financial returns, and I mean, with the problem of affecting the capacity of giving grants. Whereas, interesting enough, the first webinar we did in 2022, the first answer was lack of know-how. So again, all these answers are also linked to the composition of the audience, but we are keeping analyzing data. And again, if you have resources to share reports that can help us also understanding the different reasons behind foundations being a bit slow, maybe moving endowments into impact investing or into social purposes, mission-related investments, share it in the chat so that we can keep sharing knowledge with the community. Why we started all of this? So, as Peter said, in 2019, we have started with this group together with Philea, that was Foundations Along the Spectrum of Capital. So just to put this discussion on endowments in a framework, I wanted to show here a spectrum that we use as a EVPA. This spectrum is a live document. So there have been different versions in the last months. This is the one I'm presenting today, and you will soon find a latest version on our website. So for the moment, stay with me while I explain this. And in the second part of the slides, you will see how we map foundation strategies along the spectrum. So at the 2 extremes of the spectrum, you have grant making, the more traditional one, I would say, so the deployment of grants. Then you have traditional investing on the other side of the spectrum. And in between, you have all these different strategies. And again, you will see also with Chiara some data that can represent specific segments of the spectrum. Starting from the left side, we have catalytic grant making. That is also one of the topics that we discuss within EVPA. So if you remember the slides that Peter presented, there were the e-talks on endowments in light blue, and also the e-talks on catalytic grant making. So this is our way to also understand how foundations are using in a catalytic way their grant money. Then we have what we call impact investing, and as you see, in the last years in the space, we have started using these criteria: intentionality, measurability, additionality. So just for you to know, there are different nuances when it comes to impact investors and the way in which they invest and they use their repayable instruments. And then we have sustainable investing, which is basically a positive strategy, I mean, a positive look into ESG criteria to screen investments. And then responsible investing, that is a bit in between sustainable, so this positive screening looking at ESG, and the traditional investing. So basically it's a strategy that organizations that invest, also that foundations that invest using the endowments adopt when they want to invest in sectors that avoid harms, of course. So it's still responsible, but there is not this positive screening when it comes to ESG. So it's more a mitigation, risk mitigation tool when it comes to responsible investing. But what is interesting for us today is how we see foundations moving along the spectrum of capital. So in the part of catalytic grant making, you can have cases of foundations deploying grants with a catalytic and high engage approach. You can have foundations that engage in market building, for example, that support philanthropy and data infrastructures. And then you can also have foundations that have started in the last years to engage as outcome payer or initial investors in outcome-based mechanisms. So social impact bonds, outcome-based funds, payment by results. So they can come in as outcome payers, so through their grant money, or also as initial investor using the repayable instruments. But I go back to these, showing you the next box on the spectrum. So you have foundations that start in doing social investment, meaning they start in using the programmatic money to go beyond grant making, so to start using loans or equity. For example, the case of Doen Foundation. Doen is a foundation based in the Netherlands. They have set up Doen Participatie that is also providing the repayable finance, so loans and equity to support in a different way social enterprises. And sometimes they even support the same enterprises using the different instruments they have available. And in certain cases, foundations can also do social investment through a separate entity. For example, is the case of Fondazione Cariplo in Italy. They have set up Fondazione Social Venture Giordano dell'Amore, that is a separate entity that can do equity investment. So these are all strategies and tools that foundations can use to move along the spectrum of capital with this idea of increasing the impact and mobilizing additional resources, as Peter was saying at the beginning. And then we have the endowments. So the endowments can be invested in 3 different ways. I mean, maybe more, but to simplify, you will see 3 boxes on the spectrum. So they can invest the endowments through mission-related investments. So we have strategies between impact investing and sustainable investing. You have endowment investment into ESG funds, and then you have endowment investing avoiding harm. So everything that I was saying referring to responsible investing. Take these as really a sort of framework. It's more complex than that. You will see also with Philea, we're working on a notes that can really bring clarity on the different strategies adopted by foundations, but this is a little bit a summary. Maybe 2 data before moving to Anna. So you can see we have collected data on impact investing, and we have asked foundations to report their data on repayable instruments. So here in our survey that you can find on our website, we are not considering the grant making. And as you can see, foundations represent the 10% of the impact investors based in Europe, which is already a good amount, I would say, but we would like to see foundations using in a more innovative way repayable instruments. So maybe in the future we will see this percentage growing. And when it comes to indirect investment, so how foundations support actually impact investing actors, so how foundations invest into other impact funds. So we see that only 1% of the resources available to other impact investors comes from the endowments of the foundations. This is exactly why we wanted to have this webinar. So we believe that this number should increase and can increase because the resources are there. So I'm happy now to hand over to Anna so she can present a little bit Philea strategies, Philea narrative, and telling us about the challenges that Philea have observed when it comes to investing endowment into impact investing or with social purposes. So Anna, over to you. And I'm moving the slides so we can you can tell me when to move slides.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Alessia, for setting the scene and also for moving the slide, which I will ask you to do now to start with. So yes, thank you. So indeed, we are Philea. Philea is a relatively new organization, but building on the legacy of indeed European Foundation Center and the donors and foundations networks in Europe. So this means that now at this moment, we have a dual membership, so to say, comprised of more than 28 national associations, so the national infrastructure for foundations. And we also represent more than 250 foundations across Europe. And hence we have, through our membership, more than 10,000 foundations in our network. So we are the voice of European philanthropy, and our mission is to harness the immense multidimensional potential of European philanthropy. And we do this through 6 different clusters, which you can see on the next slides. So our activities of work are divided. Alessia, if you can go to the next slide, please. Then you can see that indeed we seek to anticipate, know, learn, connect, enable, and amplify. I won't go into detail in all of these, but for you to know that we do this with 3 cross-cutting themes identified by our members. So we hold climate, equality, and democracy high in our regard and all across everything that we do. So for example, we generate data and knowledge about the foundation sector. We provide spaces for peer exchanges. So, for instance, the full spectrum of capital group, which we do together with EVPA, is one of these peer exchanges opportunities that's relevant for today as well. We also connect our members on different topics that they're working on, for example, climate or democracy. We also try to strive for an enabling environment for philanthropy. We do this through advocacy and policy engagements. We amplify what our members are doing by communicating about philanthropy. We try to raise the profile of philanthropy more widely. And we also anticipate what's coming forward. So this is really about foresight, sense-making, bridge building, and incubation of what's happening on the ground. This is just a snapshot overview of what we do. In the next slides, indeed, I want to focus on our enable work. This is where my work is mainly situated as well as policy manager. So indeed, we are working towards an enabling environment for European philanthropy. And this includes also widening the toolbox for philanthropic organizations, for example, when it comes to impact investing from the grant making or even from the endowment side. We see that some legal frameworks are still unclear. So that's where our work is situated. But we also position philanthropy as a key actor on societal issues and facilitate strategic engagement and even collaboration opportunities with the EU institutions. We do this, of course, together with our partners, such as EVPA, because here you can see, for example, the work we are doing to work towards a co-investment facility where then collaboration becomes quite concrete on the financial side. Because as you know, collaboration can take many different forms, of course. Then on the next slide, you can see that all of our work we are doing to strive towards enabling environment, we don't do this by ourselves, the three of us in the team, but we're really supported by our Legal Affairs Committee. Our Legal Affairs Committee is underpinning all of our work, and they are really representative of the wider European philanthropy ecosystem working towards enabling environments. So you can see in the numbers that it's mainly national associations representatives, because indeed infrastructure organizations like ourselves at the European level, but also like our members at the national levels, are often tasked with advocating for enabling environment for their sector, for their members. But we also have 9 foundation representatives who take this very seriously. And this is also reflected in our co-chairs. We have Isabel Peñalosa from Spain and Ludwig Forres from the King Baudouin Foundation, one of the leading actors also on cross-border philanthropy. When it comes to our monitoring, analysis, and expertise work, I won't go into detail, but just for you to know that we are monitoring on a weekly basis everything's going on at the EU institutions related to the enabling environment. We also have quarterly newsletters, which you can subscribe to. I might drop some links in the chat. Maybe that's easier to find if you would be interested. But then we also engage with academic experts in the countries in a national mapping and monitoring exercise, which has led us to compile country profiles of the legal and fiscal environments in the different member states. And from this, we derived comparative highlights of foundation laws, which also give us more insight into how the situation is in the different member states. Indeed, here you can see snapshots of our comparative highlights. So our latest edition has been published in 2021. The methodology, as I mentioned, has been really built together with academic experts. So we also have an advisory committee, which has been leading us in this entire work. And we have also provided input into a global exercise from the Lilly School for Philanthropy, where we have fed in the European chapter for this. And at the moment, we are currently compiling and finalizing a collection of case studies of existing barriers to cross-border philanthropy to also really make this come to life beyond data, also have some more qualitative data to build on. Some of the key findings in our comparative highlights are indeed, as I already referred to before, that laws are failing to keep up with the constant evolution of philanthropy's toolbox of actions. I think we also saw this during the first Slido there we had today, that some unclarity is still in place. So for example, when it comes to also the most voted one before was striking to me, that there's a fear of not generating the required return. Of course, this has an impact on what you can do with your grant making sites. But I want to add that also a few regulations really require foundations to be in place for perpetuity. So this is an obstacle that we see, because foundations, if they are required to be set up for perpetuity, then they might be less inclined to go into more experimental phases and trying out some impact investing approaches. Indeed, some countries have become more flexible when it comes to requirements for foundations capital. So not everything is going at the same pace, but where it is becoming more flexible, this is also where we try to leverage these examples so that other countries can get inspired and can also provide more flexible legislation around this. Then other key findings include that there is indeed this balance between external supervision and self-regulation and codes of conduct. So we have noted, for example, in the Netherlands, that where a code of conduct is in place, that the policymakers are less inclined to add on additional external supervision requirements because they deem it's already being quite transparent and accountable in place. But indeed, overregulation still seems to be an issue, and there are also barriers to cross-border philanthropy, but I won't dive into too much detail on that. So if we can go to the next slide, this is really laying out the triple roles that foundations can have in impact investing, and Alessia's slide before already demonstrated that quite well. So indeed, foundations don't only have their endowments at their disposal to go into investment vehicles, but they can also do so with their grant making and their programs. Here again, it is important to note that there are some legal barriers to that. So for example, if foundations would go into impact investing with their grant making, in some countries, they might be afraid at least to lose their tax exempt status. because they're not allowed to go into for-profit making activities. So that are, again, issues that we are working to clarify. And some foundations also indeed work as thought leaders. So maybe just to add one more example is the Erste Foundation. So we know foundations can leverage the expertise they have linked to their origins. So for example, for the Erste Foundation based in Austria, this would be the origin that they have as a close link to the banks. So what they also do is to leverage the microfinance expertise that the Erste Bank has to really build the civil society organizations' financial literacy, where it's not yet so much in place. So as I already referred to before, there are some existing barriers and legal uncertainty when it comes to foundations and impact investing in terms of the requirement of the preservation of the value of the endowments, or not being allowed to go into too risky of investments. National laws also sometimes do not allow the giving of loans. The legal frameworks sometimes are also just missing. So for example, if it's not written in law, then foundations might be also self-censoring to a certain extent. So again, clarification would be really helpful in this regard. And then there's also the element of the foundation statutes. So the statutes stipulate the will of the founder of a foundation, and this might also suggest a certain, sometimes limited risk appetite. So this is why we have come up with our European Philanthropy Manifesto. Our latest edition was published in 2019, and it holds really the 4 key recommendations that we put forward towards policymakers to strive for a single market for philanthropy. Because as you know, in the EU, we do have a single market, which is really well in place when it comes to corporate organizations, but for civil society organizations, including philanthropy, this is not yet the case. So here we call for a recognition and an engagement with philanthropy. Also, we want to strive for an enabling environment for cross-border philanthropy. We also want philanthropy to be protected. For example, when it comes to unintended consequences of regulations around anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing. And then we also want to co-grant and co-invest with public authorities for the public good and civil society. We do all of this while also supporting the wider civil society and social economy asks with our partners. We are now working on a revision of our European Philanthropy Manifesto. So we are updating this because the one I was just laying out is 4 years old now. So a lot of things have changed, of course, in the past few years. And also next year, we have the European elections coming up. With a lot of questions about democracy, we found it very important to also update our recommendations. So we have started this journey back at the Philea Forum in May, where we had deep dives and exchanges with our members and with key stakeholders, including also EVPA and others who have joined the forum. We have launched an online consultation over the summer, and just in the beginning of this week, we were really consulting with our Legal Affairs Committee on a draft version of our new manifesto. So next week, we want to publish a draft version, which then everyone can also have a look at and just let us know if something is missing. So this is also a call on you, on EVPA and EVPA network to come in and make your voice heard, because we are very keen to also indeed work towards the enabling environment for impact investing as well. And our new manifesto will be published at Europhilantopics on the 29th of November. This is our yearly event taking place in Brussels, where we bring together the foundation ecosystem together with European policymakers. So this will be an occasion for us to discuss what is still needed to work towards an enabling environment for philanthropy across Europe and beyond. So because we also want to reflect on the wins that we already had, so we can see indeed within the Social Economy Action Plan, which was published in December 2021, that a lot of things have come true. And I'm reminded that I don't have too much time, so I won't go into detail. But on the next slide, there are just some things I wanted to highlight that indeed also this week, so as you can see, quite a busy week as usual, the Council recommendation, which was long expected on the social economy frameworks, has been adopted. So this is really working towards easing the barriers to cross-border philanthropy and also on the taxation issue. But also in the Social Economy Action Plan, there is the announcement of a co-investment facility for philanthropy. and a good capital study and events on emission-related investments and InvestEU. So I will add a few links in the chat. The good capital study is a really interesting one because it's the first of its kind, which really dives into both qualitative and quantitative data of foundations, endowments going into specifically mission-related investments. So it's a bit more narrow than our conversation today, but it still provides really tangible examples of how foundations are already engaging in mission-related investments. And it also puts forward this idea of the co-investment facility that's indeed included in the Social Economy Action Plan as one avenue forward for collaboration between policymakers and foundations on how to generate more impact investing. Then indeed looking ahead, because today we're also discussing what's next. I'm really happy to indeed announce that we are working very closely with Philea on a joint briefing paper, which is coming out very soon, as well as a case study collection we're working on. And we also want to organize a few pre-exchanges on impact investing still in December, really paving the way for a further collaboration, and as well as having had the commitment from the EU institutions that we will be working on the joint development of a co-investment facility for foundations. So really exciting momentum to be in, and happy to be here today. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yes, so you have Anna's email here, and I'm giving the floor back to Chiara. So Chiara, as Hannah, I'm sharing the slides, so just let me know.
Great, thanks, Alessia. Hello again. Right, let me give you a brief introduction about what we do at the Phenix Capital, and then dive deep into some trends that we see in the market. As mentioned before, Phenix Capital is an impact investing consultancy company. We are based in Amsterdam with global activities. Our mission is to catalyze institutional capital towards impact investments. In the next slides, you see again the spectrum. This time it's flipped, I think the other way around, left to right. But I just wanted to mention here that we focus on that part of the impact investing market that targets competitive market returns, at least, you know, market rate returns. So aligning with the GIN definition, but narrowing down to this segment. And we help investors such as pension funds, insurance companies, foundations with tailored solutions, such as formulating impact mandates, selecting impact funds, and unknown frameworks. And secondly, we mainly also help with sharing market intelligence through publications, databases, and events. So as part of that, we have a database internally of impact funds, which since 2019 is also available for investors to subscribe to. In here, we have tracked the constant increase of impact funds, as you can see here across the years. 2019 was the largest jump year on year, but still positive trends also after the pandemic. So we have more than 2,500 funds right now, more than 1,000 managers, and 680 billion dollar. And yes, I think that in terms of asset classes, you see in the next slides, it's private equity, the most the dominant predominant one, but many opportunities also in private debt, infrastructure, public equity, which is the fastest growing one in terms of AUM. And just reminding you, all of these statistics are from financial first impact investments. And for us on the database, we are not asking anything to the fund managers to be listed, so we are quite confident that we are representing the universe in quite a good way. Of course, you never cover the full universe of funds, especially when it's growing so fast, but it's quite aligned with what the GIN is tracking, IFC, and some of the other investors also are tracking. In terms of the SDGs, we see that this is assets under management that are linked to specific themes. it quite changes as we see big allocations coming in or big funds allocating to impact, but SDG 7 is always there at the top of the list. And now you see SDG 9 following that. And then SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, really increased in the last years in terms of allocations. But definitely a trend that sees the environmental SDGs with larger allocations compared to the social ones, which you see a bit lower down in the graph. But switching now from the perspective of the buy side, who is investing in these financial first impact funds? You see here, maybe it's a little bit small, but Foundation Endowments actually top the list in terms of count of organizations that we have tracked with impact mandates or impact allocations. However, it's the only one that where you see that the blue section, the light blue section, is slightly bigger than the darker blue one, and that is with basically meaning that the US, as well, US, Canada, North America in general, have a larger allocation compared to Europe. So Europe are leading the way in all the other type of investment type of investors. For example, the pension funds, fiduciary managers, asset managers, banks, wealth managers, etc. Foundation endowments in the US, to be fair, they're really, really advanced in their practices. So again, another reason I think that why we are here, and hopefully we can have a different trend in some time on that. Few other things that I wanted to show you in terms of target markets. I found interesting this graph that shows that actually investors investing in these financial first impact funds mainly invest in developed countries, are part of the DFIs, of course, and it highlights a bit the fact that they are risk adverse and they don't do something that's very different from what they would do in the current traditional investment portfolio. And actually also there is quite a home bias when it comes to impact investing, you notice. In the next slide, I wanted to highlight the differences in terms of allocations. You see the pension funds, typical size of the funds in which they commit to is almost 500 million versus 200 and a bit less for other players. And so this made me think that you would think that for pension funds that are so big and have also, you know, regulatory constraints and a fiduciary duty, is difficult for them to invest in impact. But actually we see that that there's a lot coming exactly from the pension funds, especially in Europe, and we have worked with quite a few of them. In the next slide, Alessia, I've given you a couple of examples from the Netherlands, PGGM and APG, but also I took the 20 largest pension funds in Europe. Sorry, it's a bit dated. It's 2019 because I couldn't find the more updated table to use. But out of these, we have tracked commitments to impact funds for 13 of these huge institutions. And as you can see from these sources, PGGM, it's about the mandates and let's say the ambition that they had for 2020, but they are doing it seeing also an opportunity within investing in solution in the SDGs. And similarly also APG, which is not only in Europe, but globally one of the largest fiduciary managers in this case, but they've invested in ILX, and they clearly say that also they do that because it's an attractive, it's attractive from a risk return perspective. So these organizations are moving into the impact for sure, because they see ambition, they have an ambition to do good, but certainly they think that they can also make attractive returns from that. So just wanted to share quickly from our experience of working with these type of institutions, how they get started. And yeah, typically in this case, I've brought you the example of the last one we worked with, but there's quite a trend we've seen in terms of how they approach it as pension funds. Usually we would get in touch with one person that is trying to make the case for impact internally. And for this last one, for example, they thought they had to do it in private markets. but the entire portfolio was allocated to liquid strategies in public equity, fixed income. They had often also they already have a theme that they want to have a positive impact on, which is often also related to the profession of the beneficiaries. For example, for the healthcare or the general practitioners' pensions related to healthcare, or for retail sector, more about circularity or food. So we presented a study of the impact investing universe in their themes across asset classes in public and private, making a case of impact, showing pros and cons of doing it in private markets or liquid markets, and just being aware of what are practices in this industry. Through that, they were able to get the mandate approved from the board, and they decided to go first within the asset class that they knew best. So in this case, the public equity one, so that they could learn more from the impact integration within the selection process, and then afterwards, continue in other private market mandates. So starting from that, I was also very happy to see that they created a theory of change at the pension fund level, which is quite advanced. And then aligned to that, continue on the selection process and due diligence on potential funds, also with the support on the impact due diligence side. They allocated 1% of the AUM to start with the ambition to grow. Yeah, that's currently where they're at. And I think this approach can be applied to multiple type of investors. And so starting from an asset class, the endowment portfolio managers can already do something in what they know well, reducing unknowns in the process and focusing on the impact side. Just today, also here in Japan, I heard from a foundation that started allocating 7% of their endowments to impact, to a few fund allocations. So I think there is a lot of room to do more, and hopefully we can work together on doing that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Cara. And sorry, I suppose there's a lot of information from both our speakers there, but it does kind of show that there is a growing movement, and a lot of these kind of barriers or opportunities that exist.
Why I don't listen now?
Others will have faced the same challenges. So I think there's something here for us about trying to get this data out there, trying to get experiences shared. And that's a very subtle way of shoehorning into where we were planning to go next in this call, which was to really focus on transparency in the sector and sharing some of this space. However, in the spirit of transparency, also all three of our speakers had so much to share that we realized we should have done an 1.5-hour webinar instead of an hour. So what we thought would be more useful would be to move to a Q&A with you guys who are on the call, and your chance to ask some questions of the panelists. As always in these Zoom calls, the Zoom chat is empty of questions because everyone leaves it to someone else to put a question in, and that's absolutely fine. So just to get us started and kicked off and give you a couple of minutes to think about any questions you may have, I just wanted to ask a question of the panelists that's a little bit, I suppose, taking advantage of the fact the audience haven't asked you questions, to say to you as panelists, I mean, you work trying to move capital into impact, to get foundation endowments to move towards impact, as we all do. What's the kind of one question you would ask the audience, or what's the one thing that you would like to know from this audience on this space? Does that make sense as a question? And considering we haven't prepped these questions, I'm looking at my fellow panelists to see if they hate me or not. But there's Hannah, do you have any thoughts on that as a question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. I think indeed, when it comes to foundations, we understand that not all of them will move into the impact investing space for different reasons, but I understand people joining here might be very keen to do so. So I was wondering, maybe it would be interesting also to hear from you what you would need from the philanthropy infrastructure. What do you need from us, from Philea, from EVPA, to support you on this journey. So we have talked already about the advocacy work that we do, the peer exchanges we could provide. Maybe if we can get a bit more tangible, or maybe there are things we're missing that you would need from us, would be interesting to hear.
And I realize, Gary, you literally just stopped talking and then I'm asking you to talk again, but do you have any thoughts on that question? And feel free, and then we'll come to the audience to see if there's any feedback on Hannah's question.
From my side, it's always interesting to understand what are the challenges to get started. I think we asked that at the beginning, and so it was already quite insightful to see, right, the fact that it was the fear of not making enough returns. But yeah, I wonder, you know, if pension funds can do that, then I think that there is an argument there that there is room, right, to start doing something, maybe starting small, you know, building it up. And so, yeah, just wondering a bit more in detail, what is it that's a bit of a, you know, roadblock to get started?
Thanks. So now doing that thing where we play the awkward game, which is we can sit here and wonder if anyone in the audience is feeling brave enough or awake enough or still with us enough to actually give some thoughts on that or anything else on the panel. Is there either anything you can share with us that you need support in from us as groups, or is there anything that you can delve a little bit more in your own experience around what the real barriers are for you? Because we sit here pontificating about what the barriers are, but it'd be great to hear from you guys if there's something that you feel is a real barrier that is rarely mentioned. And we're going to go into one of these silent moments where if no one answers, we can just have a 60-second meditation. It'll be nice. So, but do feel free. And we have one question in the chat if no one is feeling brave enough to come forward with their own thoughts on the challenges they face. Feel like a game show host. And so in that case, we can move to a question from Eugenia in the chat from INP. And I mean, I'm going to take a huge, terrible ableist leap here and kind of assume that you can all read. I'm not discounting anyone who may not be able to. But at the same time, her question, alongside sharing some of the great work that INP do, is how do fund managers like INP access European foundations? And I suppose maybe for Chiara, you may be able to give us a little bit of insight about what impact funds are telling you is the difficulty in kind of engaging with this market and engaging with foundations if possible.
I think, well, what we see in general, it's been quite difficult, you know, fundraising markets in last years, especially also when fundraising specifically on the emerging markets or Africa. But some successful cases I can think of have focused first on developing the first fund series for the DFIs, and then starting with diversifying the LP base a bit more with large family offices, and then approaching the foundations and endowments. So I think, yeah, it's also a bit of a question of time and developing this first series and develop a proven concept for the endowments to then to come in. Yeah.
So considering that you are shy, I will put back my Slido. So I know that you enjoyed this in the first part. So let me share the screen for a moment. I have two questions for you, and in between a great announcement. So let me share the screen, and we can, voila, we can go immediately to a question. So then everyone can can answer. So we were saying that one of the problem might be transparency. Peter mentioned this already. So I want to ask you a question on transparency. Go to Slido, go back to where you were, and let's try to answer this question. How easy is it for you to find information about others investing in their endowment for impact? How transparent is this area? So we have seen Chiara shared data on pension funds, so there is evidences there. Then with Hannah, we have looked into the different barriers that foundations might have. So it's not just simple as it can be, explaining why they don't do that. But voila, how transparent is this? It's a challenge, a struggle, could be more transparent. For the moment is the most voted option. So maybe to answer the question for Anna, we can, as philanthropy and impact investing infrastructure, supporting this, so improving the transparency. And then I wanted to tell you something actually. So considering that transparency might be an issue, we are experimenting something new, let's say. So a little bit following what Phenix was doing with pension funds, we also want to test a little bit something that is a pledge for foundations. So we have received some positive comments from foundations that are part of our community, especially those foundations that are already active and innovative. So they would love also to start testimonying a bit more, saying what they're doing. As Peter said, we have already engaged with lots of them through our webinars, but now we really want to test the pledge, the concept of a pledge. We're going to have a session, a practical workshop in Torino, which is my city, I already told you at the beginning, but we're going to have the Impact Week there in November. And on the Friday, we're going to have this workshop. Our partners will be there. Some foundations from our community will be there to share their own experience already in investing in endowments with impact. And now a question for you. So we think this is a good idea. But of course, we have a question, last one, that is, if we were to do a pledge, in your opinion, how do we ensure it translates into action? Because as said, the time for acting is now. We still see that things are moving slowly. How can we make sure that if we go for a pledge, then this is going to be translated into action? Clear commitments, explaining what I'm pledging to do, how to guides, so basically help me, so putting together guides that can explain you how to do so. Regular reviews, group checks in, have I done it? So also having peers that can support you. It's nice because I'm trying to read questions and you are voting, so they move. Public transparency, people will know I promise to do it. So is this a sort of a push for the sector to engage more into, to engage into a pledge, to share commitments publicly? Others share comments in the chat. This is really your chance to express your views if we have not captured this in the answers. And so public transparency, people will know I promise to do it. So perfect. We will create a website with all the names. No, we will work with our partners, Phenix and Philea and others, Impact Investing Institutes, our members that are already doing. I've seen lots of them connected today. And we will keep you posted, and hopefully this will be a movement towards more transparency and more resources invested through the endowments into the impact space. Last but not least, thank you so much, Chiara and Hannah. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, Isa and Philippa from EVPA to organize this webinar with us. The webinar is being recorded, so we will keep on promoting it. And if you want to engage more with us, you know where to find us. There is a survey. Feedback is important for us. We would like to understand how to do things maybe better, maybe differently. If you have ideas, you can share these. You see the QR code here. And considering that it's 11:01, we were pretty perfect on time. Peter, I don't know if you want to still say something, or Chiara, Hannah. Otherwise, I can thank our main supporter. You can commission Philea and Phenix again. And again, me and Peter, our emails are there, and we can share the emails from Chiara and Anna. I'll stop share my screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alessia. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in
Bye-bye.
Torino.
See you in Torino, indeed.